catch sight of prophetess Patricia, popularly known as Mama S., a woman whose very presence sent whispers through the air. Some claimed she could pierce straight into a person's soul, unearthing secrets no one dared to reveal. Others believed she spoke directly with God. But today, something was different. Something unsettling hovered like a storm about to break. The air inside the grand hall was tense, a strange energy crackling in the atmosphere. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoed from the side. Heads spun as all eyes turned to the source. Agata, one of Mama Essie's most trusted aides, rushed to the front of the hall, her eyes wide with shock and awe. Her breath was ragged as she pointed toward the altar. "She did it again! Mama C healed him!" Agata's voice shook with excitement. A wave of cheers erupted from the crowd. People clapped, danced, and praised God for the miracle they had just witnessed. At the center of it all, a man who had been crippled moments ago was now leaping in joy. The congregation's faith soared to new heights. But not everyone was convinced. From a quiet corner of the hall, Elizabeth, a quiet churchgoer, watched in silence. Her eyes narrowed with doubt. She had seen that same crippled man walking freely in the market just days earlier. Her heart wrestled with suspicion, but her lips remained sealed. "Who would believe me?" she thought. "Mama C is untouchable. Her followers would fight tooth and nail to protect her." The rise of a prophetess. Years earlier, Patricia had been a humble girl from a small, God-fearing family. Her parents raised her with love, teaching her to be honest, devoted, and walk in the light of righteousness. In her youth, she was the pride of the church, leading Sunday school, organizing prayer meetings, and singing in the choir with a voice like a heavenly bell. People adored her, and some even believed she was destined for greatness. But destiny has a strange way of changing paths. Years later, after struggling to build a ministry of her own, Patricia faced frustration. No matter how hard she prayed, preached, and fasted, her following remained small. Her sermons drew polite applause, but failed to leave a lasting impact. Then, everything changed at a grand conference for pastors. There she met Pastor Benji, a man known for filling stadiums with his miracle crusades. He pulled Patricia aside with a knowing look. "You're trying to be godly," he said with a smirk, "but you will never make an impact until you're willing to sacrifice." Patricia furrowed her brow, confused. "Sacrifice?" Pastor Benji leaned in, his voice a whisper as he spoke of a special ceremony, a ritual that required a significant offering. At first, she hesitated, but Pastor Benji's words clung to her mind like thorns. "Do you want to be ordinary?" he asked, "or do you want to be untouchable?" Her desperation for recognition overtook her. That night, she agreed. The ritual was unlike anything she had ever seen. Surrounded by figures cloaked in red and black, Patricia's heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. She was instructed to make an offering, something precious and irreplaceable. Her heart froze when they told her the cost, her chance to ever have children. Her eyes filled with tears, but her desire for greatness silenced her doubts. Her decision was made. The chants grew louder. The air grew cold. In the stillness of midnight, Patricia gave up her womb. When it was over, she felt it, a change, like a dark cloak settling on her shoulders. Power coursed through her veins. She felt different, and she was. The rise of Mama S. When Patricia returned from the conference, everything shifted. Suddenly, people flocked to her services. Her sermons went viral. Word of her divine power spread like wildfire across Nigeria and beyond. People traveled for miles to see her. Her small ministry grew into a movement. Her name was no longer Patricia. She was now Mama C, the woman who sees it all. Her wealth grew as quickly as her fame. Foreign donors, cash gifts, and offerings poured in. People claimed she could heal the sick, find lost children, and prophesy future events. Her miracles drew thousands to her church, but behind her angelic smile lay something much darker: the underwater covenant. Unbeknownst to her followers, Patricia's power came at a terrible cost. She was no ordinary prophetess. Beneath her human exterior lay a hidden truth. Patricia was no longer fully human. She was a half-human, half-serpent hybrid, bound by an ancient underwater covenant. Every midnight she disappeared from her luxurious mansion. Her maids would glance at her bedroom door, thinking she was in deep prayer. But Patricia was far from praying. Quiet as a shadow, she would slip out of the house and make her way to the riverbank behind her mansion. Her feet touched the cold water and her human form dissolved. Her legs fused, her skin became dark, glistening scales. Her eyes shifted, pupils narrowing like a serpent's. With a silent plunge, she vanished into the water, swallowed whole by the depths of the river. In the underwater kingdom, she joined her occult brothers and sisters, other pastors and prophets who had made the same bargain. There, they learned dark strategies to deceive their congregations and keep them bound in fear. It was here that Patricia drew her greatest power. Her allegiance lay with the Marine Queen, a towering figure with serpentine features, whose eyes could paralyze even the boldest man. The Marine Queen gifted Patricia sight beyond sight, allowing her to see into people's lives, their secrets, and their fears. But every gift came with a price. Patricia had sacrificed her soul, her humanity, and her womb for this power. The Church of Deception. Back in her church, no one suspected a thing. To her followers, Mama S.E. was a holy prophetess sent by God himself. People arrived in droves, desperate for miracles, healing, and deliverance. Many sold their family heirlooms, livestock, and even their life savings to sow a seed into her ministry. Patricia introduced new holy tools, bottles of miracle oil, and blessed water, sold for outrageous prices. Her greatest invention was the mirror of life. Each member received one, told to look into it each morning and speak to it to reveal their spiritual flaws. But what the followers didn't know was that these mirrors were connected to the Marine Kingdom. Through these mirrors, Mama C spied on her members. She watched their weaknesses, fears, and private moments. One Sunday, she called out a young woman named KY. "Last night," Mama Say said with a knowing smile, "you argued with your husband about his job, didn't you?" Kay's eyes widened with shock. Her hands flew to her mouth. How did you know?" The congregation erupted in applause, calling it divine revelation. But Elizabeth, watching from the back, knew better. She clenched her fists, her heart racing with doubt. She must have used the mirror, Elizabeth thought, glancing at her own mirror with unease. A test of faith. The following week, a young man named Obora arrived at the church. He had recently returned from overseas with his mother. Curious about the famous Mama Essie, they decided to attend her service. As the service reached its peak, Mama Essie scanned the crowd with her sharp gaze. Her eyes locked onto Obora. A chilling grin crossed her face. "You man," she called, "come forward." Obora hesitated, glancing at his mother. She urged him to go, so he did. "Your life has been surrounded by many challenges," Mama S.E. said, "but your destiny is not ordinary. You have been chosen." The crowd gasped, murmuring prayers and praise. Obora's eyes widened. He had not told anyone of his struggles. But as he stared into Mama C's eyes, something felt off. The warmth of a true prophet was missing. Chosen for what? He wondered. As Mama Essie raised her hand to bless him, Elizabeth watched from the back, heart pounding. Her eyes flicked to Obora, then to the mirror in her hand. She realized the truth. "Run, Obora," she whispered. "Run before it's too late." "Step forward, my son," Mama S called, her voice thick with authority and mystery. The congregation leaned forward in unison, every eye locked on the young man at the back of the hall. His heart thudded in his chest. Obora hesitated, glancing at his mother. "Go," she whispered urgently, giving him a nudge. "This could be your blessing." With slow, unsure steps, Obora made his way to the front, feeling the weight of the crowd's eyes on him. Catrius Professus Patricia, known as Mama S, raised her hands in a dramatic gesture, her face the very image of divine revelation. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment. Then she let out a sharp, exaggerated breath. "The Lord has revealed something troubling to me, my son," she declared with a heavy sigh. Silence blanketed the church. The air was thick with tension. The congregation watched in awe, hanging on her every word. Mama C's eyes locked on Obora, her gaze sharp and intense, like she could see straight into his soul. She shook her head slowly, as if burdened by the message. "Your life battery is running dangerously low," she said, her voice filled with somber gravity. "I see darkness ahead. If nothing is done, you will not live to see your 30s. No marriage, no children, all of it lost." Abora's heart pounded in his chest. Life battery, he thought, confusion flashing across his face. It didn't make sense, but the seriousness in her voice terrified him. His throat went dry and he swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "Mama, please," he stammered, his voice cracking with fear. "What does that mean? What should I do?" Mama C placed a firm but comforting hand on his shoulder. her gaze narrowing with intensity. Her voice dropped to a low, deliberate whisper, making the silence in the church feel even louder. It means, my son, that if something isn't done quickly, you will not live long. Your days are numbered, but the Lord is merciful. He has provided a way to save you. Gasps echoed across the room. Obora's mother clutched her chest, her face etched with fear. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mama, what can we do?" she pleaded, desperation cracking her voice. "Please, tell us what we must do." Patricia raised her hand high, like she was calling down divine light from the heavens. Her voice rang out clear and commanding. "The Lord has spoken, and there is a solution," she said, her tone shifting to one of hope and assurance. "There is a way to renew your life battery, to ensure that you live a long, prosperous life, but it requires a sacrifice." The room grew deathly quiet. The word sacrifice hung in the air like a storm cloud. "What sacrifice, Mama S?" Obora's mother whispered, her eyes darting to her son. "What kind of sacrifice must we give?" Patricia lowered her hand slowly, her face calm and serious. She leaned in, as if sharing a sacred secret. "The Lord has directed me that your son's life can be renewed with the sacrifice of a cow, but not just any cow. It must be strong, healthy, and without blemish, a symbol of a new life." Obora's mind reeled. He had heard of sacrifices before, but this was different. This was personal. "A cow?" he muttered, his voice filled with doubt. "Where am I supposed to get a cow right now, Mama?" Patricia gave him a warm smile, her eyes twinkling with reassurance. "Do not worry, my son," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "The Lord understands your situation. You need not search for the cow yourself. You can convert this sacrifice into a seed. Give the amount in cash, and the church will handle the offering on your behalf." Her words were smooth, calculated. The congregation nodded in agreement, many of them having done the same before. "Do not delay, Obora," his mother whispered frantically, her eyes filled with tears. "Don't play with your life. Do as Mama C says. Your life is worth more than any amount of money." Obora's hands trembled. The weight of fear and his mother's pleading was too much. Reluctantly, he reached into his coat, pulled out his checkbook, and scribbled down a large sum. His heart ached as he signed it. The moment he tore the check from the book, he felt a sense of relief, but also a gnawing sense of loss. Patricia accepted the check with a slow, satisfied smile, her fingers curled around it like it was the most precious treasure on earth. "My son," she declared, her voice now brimming with triumph, "your obedience has pleased the Lord. Your life is now in His hands, and you shall be rewarded. The darkness is gone." The crowd erupted in joyful shouts of "Hallelujah!" Obora returned to his seat, shaken but relieved. His mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face as she thanked Mama S.E. over and over. But what Obora didn't know was that there was no cow, no offering, no sacrifice. Patricia had no intention of buying any cow. The money went straight into her growing project fund, her mansion on the outskirts of town. This wasn't the first time she had preyed on fear, and it wouldn't be the last. The truth begins to unravel. In the back of the church, Elizabeth watched it all unfold. She had seen it too many times. The pattern was the same: a prophecy mixed with fear, a solution disguised as a financial offering, and a promise of deliverance. She had seen it all. Her suspicions grew stronger with each miracle she witnessed. One Sunday, an elderly man in a wheelchair was rolled up to the altar. Mama asked her hand on his head, murmuring a loud, dramatic prayer. Suddenly the man jumped up, shaking his legs as if they were brand new. The crowd exploded into shouts of joy. But Elizabeth knew that man. She had seen him walking around in the street market just the week before. He's no cripple, she thought, her heart tightening with disgust. He's an actor, another trick to keep people fooled. Over time, Patricia's wealth skyrocketed. She built a mansion with gold-plated furniture, luxury cars, and personal staff. She called it a reward from God, but Elizabeth knew the truth. She knew that the only people losing in this equation were the poor, the desperate, and the broken-hearted. The final deception. But Patricia's greed didn't stop at money. She now targeted powerful men. One day, she called out a businessman named Mr. Okiki during service. "Brother, okay," she said, closing her eyes like she was receiving a message. "The Lord is showing me a troubling vision. A dark cloud surrounds your household. Someone close to you, someone you trust deeply, is working against you." The man's eyes widened. Who, Mamasi? Who is it?" he asked, his voice filled with fear. Patricia's eyes opened slowly. "It is your wife," she whispered, her voice dripping with dread. "Her spirit is entangled in envy and greed. She is blocking your breakthrough." "Oh," Mr. Okiki gasped. "Not my wife?" But Patricia raised her hand in the air, her face a mask of divine wisdom. "But fear not, Brother Okay. With my guidance, you can break this curse. All it requires is patience, prayer, and obedience." What she didn't say was her real plan. She planted doubt in Mr. Okiki's heart, isolating him from his wife. Slowly, she drew him closer, offering him special one-on-one prayers at her mansion, private sessions. She knew that wealthy, powerful men like him were vulnerable. Her eyes were always on her next prize. The revelation. Elizabeth's heart burned with righteous anger. Enough was enough. She knew she had to expose Patricia. But it wouldn't be easy. People worshipped Mama C like a god. Exposing her would be dangerous. But Elizabeth prayed for strength. She vowed to find a way to reveal the truth. She would protect others like Obora and Mr. Okiki from falling into the same trap. With every service she attended, Elizabeth's resolve grew stronger. "One day," she whispered to herself, "one day the world will see her for what she really is. The rise and fall of Mama, deception, power, and redemption." "Step forward, my son," Mama Essie's voice echoed like a thunderclap across the crowded church. Her tone was calm but commanding, filled with the weight of divine authority. Abora sat frozen in his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. Is she talking to me? He thought. His eyes darted toward his mother, who nudged him hard on the shoulder. Go, my son, she whispered, her eyes wide with urgency. This could be your blessing. Slowly, with shaky legs, Obora rose from his seat and walked down the aisle. His footsteps felt heavier with each step, as if the ground itself wanted to hold him back. The congregation watched in silent anticipation, their eyes brimming with hope, fear, and awe. Mama Essie raised both hands, her eyes closed, as if she were receiving a message from heaven. Her head tilted upward, her lips moved silently. Then she gasped. Her eyes snapped open, and she stared directly at Abora. Her face was a mask of sorrow and concern. The Lord has revealed something troubling to me, my son, she announced, her voice carrying a weight that made every breath in the room still. Your life battery is running dangerously low. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Life battery, whispered a few onlookers. Obora's brows furrowed. Life battery. He repeated, confused but deeply unsettled. His heart pounded harder. He could feel his pulse in his ears. Yes, Patricia continued, shaking her head with slow, deliberate sorrow. If nothing is done soon, you will not live to see your 30s. No marriage, no children. Everything will be lost. Obora's eyes widened. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Mama, please, he pleaded, his voice cracking. What should I do? How can I stop this? Patricia stepped forward and placed her hand on his shoulder, her face soft with compassion, but her eyes sharp with calculation. Her voice dropped to a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone. The Lord has shown me a solution, she said. There is a way to renew your life battery, to ensure you live a long, prosperous life, but it requires a sacrifice. The church fell silent. Sacrifice. That word carried power. It stirred a mixture of hope and fear in the hearts of the congregation. What kind of sacrifice, Mama? Obora's mother asked, clutching her son's arm with trembling hands. Patricia nodded as if she had been expecting the question. The Lord has revealed that the sacrifice must be a cow. Not just any cow, but one that symbolizes new life. Strong, healthy, and without blemish. The room buzzed with whispers. People nodded, some murmuring about the power of sacrifice. But, Mama, Obora said, his voice strained with panic, where will I find a cow now? Patricia's face softened into a patient smile. Do not worry, my son, she said, waving a hand. The Lord understands. You don't need to find the cow yourself. You can convert the sacrifice into a seed, a financial seed. Simply give the amount equal to the value of the cow, and the church will handle the rest. Obora hesitated. His eyes darted to his mother, who grabbed his arm tighter. Don't delay, Obora, she whispered frantically. Your life is at stake. Your life is worth more than any amount of money. Tears welled up in Obora's eyes. His fingers trembled as he reached for his checkbook. Every stroke of the pen felt heavier than the last. When he handed it to Patricia, he felt an overwhelming mix of relief and regret. Patricia took the check, her eyes lighting up with satisfaction. My son, she said, holding the check up like a trophy. Your obedience has pleased the Lord. Your life is safe. Your future is secure. The darkness is gone." The church erupted in thunderous applause. People cheered, some clapped, others wept in joy. But Elizabeth didn't clap. She sat quietly at the back, her eyes cold and sharp. She had seen this before. The pattern was clear now. She knew Mama C wasn't just a fraud. She was a predator. The salt and sugar scam. It wasn't just the life battery prophecy. Patricia had many schemes. One of the most outrageous was her so-called holy water blessing. People brought jerry cans of water to the church, believing Mama C's prayers would turn them into divine remedies for financial breakthroughs, healing, and protection. Behind closed doors, Patricia's aides, Felix and Linda, would simply add a dash of salt and sugar to each jerry can. "Can you believe they're paying that much for a bit of salt and sugar?" Linda said with a snicker. "Easy money," Felix chuckled, shaking his head. Elizabeth heard it all, and she knew she had to act. The night of revelation. Driven by curiosity and courage, Elizabeth decided to follow Patricia. On a moonlit night, she hid near the river behind Patricia's mansion, her phone in hand, ready to record. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps as she crouched low in the bush. The clock struck midnight. Then, just as she had hoped, Patricia emerged from the mansion. Her white robe shimmered under the moonlight as she moved with unnatural grace toward the riverbank. Elizabeth's eyes widened in horror. Patricia raised her arms and began chanting in a language Elizabeth didn't recognize. The words sent a chill down her spine. Suddenly, Patricia's body began to change. Her skin shimmered like scales. Her legs melded together, forming a long, sleek tail. Her eyes glowed with an eerie golden light. No, this can't be real," Elizabeth whispered, her heart racing. Patricia slithered into the river, disappearing beneath the surface with a splash. Elizabeth clapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a scream. Her whole body trembled. Patricia wasn't just a fraud. She was something else. Something inhuman. The confrontation. The next day, Elizabeth returned to the church. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was clear. She had to expose Patricia, no matter the cost. But Patricia was already watching her. Her gaze lingered on Elizabeth that day, sharp as a blade. "Elizabeth," Patricia called, her voice smooth as silk but edged with menace. "Come forward." Elizabeth's heart stopped. She knew this was no ordinary call. "The Lord has shown me that you carry a heavy burden," Patricia declared. "Come, let Mama C lift it from you." The congregation cheered, urging Elizabeth forward. "I'm not afraid," Elizabeth thought, stepping forward. She didn't flinch as Patricia laid a cold hand on her forehead. "You are treading on dangerous waters, my child," Patricia whispered, her lips barely moving. "Be careful. Some secrets are better left uncovered." Elizabeth stared into her eyes, her resolve hardening. "I will not stop," she whispered back. The fall of Mama C. Elizabeth gathered everything she had, photos, videos, recordings, and testimonies from victims. When she released it all to the media, the world was stunned. News reports flooded the airwaves. Prophetess exposed, they read. Former followers wept openly, mourning the money, time, and faith they had poured into Patricia's ministry. She used us, one man sobbed. She used our faith against us. Patricia was arrested. Her mansion was seized. Her followers, once blind with loyalty, now saw her for what she truly was. Elizabeth's final message. Standing before the congregation, Elizabeth raised her voice. My brothers and sisters, this experience has taught me something crucial, she said firmly. Just because someone calls themselves a prophet doesn't mean they are sent by God. We must be discerning. We must seek the truth beyond appearances. There are true servants of God. They do not ask for wealth or demand sacrifices. They walk humbly, serving with love. The crowd listened, many wiping tears from their eyes. Be wise, be watchful, Elizabeth said in closing. Do not let fear and desperation lead you into darkness. The world had seen the truth, and Elizabeth's courage had become a light for others to follow.